So my name is Nicole McCadden, and I'm the Marketing and Public Affairs Manager with Greenlink. And I've been here for about 5.5 years. And in my role, I handle any type of public-facing initiatives. So that could mean helping the Greenville Transit Authority board stay up to date on programming updates and operations updates. It could mean making sure that our elected officials are in the loop on different initiatives that we're undergoing. And it means keeping the writers and the public up to date with different things that's going on at Greenlink. So I'm kind of always all over the place, behind the scenes, updating our documents, our websites, arranging public meetings, and doing our best to make sure everybody is informed about what's going on. And so at Greenlink, there's a lot always going on. So we operate 3 transportation services, the first being fixed route service, which is the big buses you see that operate on routes and that service bus stops at specific time points. So we say fixed route because the bus doesn't leave the route and riders know when to expect that bus to come by. And that service operates Monday through Friday from 5:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. and then Saturdays from 8:30 a.m. until 6:30 p.m. The second transportation service we provide is called Greenville Area Paratransit, which we use the acronym GAP, G-A-P. And GAP service is for individuals whose disability prevents them from accessing one of those fixed route bus stops independently. And so that is a client-based system. They have to get approval from their medical care provider to become a client of the GAP service. But then once you're a member, you call and make a reservation, and we schedule a driver to pick you up and drive you to your destination at least the day before you need that service, so that our drivers know where they're going when they show up for work that morning. And then our last transportation service we provide is the downtown trolley network. And so in Greenville, that is funded through hospitality tax dollars. And so it is primarily geared towards the days and hours that people are out going to restaurants, visiting parks, going to museums. So that's Thursday and Friday evenings, Saturday and Sunday. A lot of people don't think of transportation when they think of quality of life, right? Our most common, hot topics in Greenville have to do with medical care, housing, employment, but transportation is that connecting piece between all of those places, right? So if your place of living is in a very rural area and you have limited access to get to grocery stores or higher education or jobs, it's not a very livable area if you're facing any type of transportation barrier. And so public transit is that connector between all of these. And in 2017, we really focused on collecting some data about these barriers to these common quality of life topics. And we had Greenville Tech do a survey, and it came back that 11% of their students have had to withdraw from a class at some point due to unreliable transportation. A more recent survey, so that one was in 2017, but most recently, they did a survey that found out that 27% of Greenville Tech students are facing some type of basic needs and security. So either food, housing, or other basic needs that they're encountering day to day. And that of those 27%, those students are spending $30 or more on transportation to get to their classes every week. So when you just think about, economic mobility and the need to receive higher education or job training, but then you have a barrier to even get there, then there's an issue with being able to achieve those important steps in someone's life. When we talk about medical care in 2017, GHS, so previous or now known as Prisma, right? But GHS pulled its data for us on the number of ambulance trips for non-emergency transportation. So this is someone who, probably should have been seeing a primary care provider before it reached the need to call for an ambulance, but still had to call for an ambulance because they didn't have another way to get to a medical care provider. So they relied on that for their transportation. And in 2016, they spent more than $4.5 million in a single year on transportation trips that weren't really an emergency. And so therefore an ambulance wasn't really needed. And so that's a lot of individuals that, if they had had access, and that could have been insurance access or just not having a primary care provider set up, but it could be transportation access that they needed that ambulance to get them there. And then lastly, when we talk about workforce, from 2015 to 2016, the number of unemployment benefit applications that came into the area, 14% of those said that they did not have access to a vehicle. So it didn't mean that these individuals said they didn't get a job because they didn't have access to a vehicle, but it is interesting that 14% of those claimants didn't have access, period, to a vehicle. And so we'd like to think that if someone can get to a job, they have transportation to a job, then they can find stable employment and they could earn income for their families. So yeah, transportation is that link between all of those pieces. Yep. So Greenlink is proposing for us to continue our existing service operations, which we have a transit development plan, which has outlined our goals for improving service for Greenville County residents. So the first phase of that transit development plan, we actually implemented January 4th of this year. So we're excited that those weekday hours now go until 11:30 p.m. Prior to that, we ended at 7:30, which made it very difficult for individuals who worked a second or third shift job or who worked a standard 9 to 5 to be able to run errands after work, right? Ending at 7:30 meant you just couldn't get a whole lot done. So we're going to continue to operate those service hours Monday through Friday. We are working very hard to secure bus drivers to extend Saturday hours to mirror those weekday hours. So as I mentioned earlier, Saturday operates from 8:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., but we want Saturday to operate 5:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. So we hope that that'll launch this summer, and we do have the funding for that. So we're excited that later hours is secured as soon as we get the people to drive the buses. But the third phase within our transit development plan to make Greenlink more usable and more convenient for Greenville County residents is to look at our service frequency. And what I mean by service frequency is we currently have one bus on each route, and that route takes 60 minutes to complete. So if you're at a bus stop, you can expect that bus to drive by your specific bus stop just once an hour. And if you miss that bus, you wait 60 minutes for that bus to come back by. And so that could be like something that someone wouldn't choose to not use Greenlink, right? If they're planning their whole schedule around this once an hour transportation service. It also just means they have less opportunities in a day period to catch the bus. Because if you only have it once an hour, we operate 18 hours a day. You've got 18 options to catch it. But if we can put two buses on a route, and so one comes by your bus stop every 30 minutes, you now have 36 opportunities to catch that bus. And so just for an example, imagine you get off work at 5:30 and you have two errands. You want to go to the pharmacy and you want to go to the grocery store. Well, currently, it would take you about 3 hours to complete those two errands. You'd get off work at 5:30, you'd catch a bus and you'd ride it to your destination, and then you'd wait for another bus to come back by. You ride that for a destination, and then you'd wait for the next bus to come back by and you would go home, right? So, and those buses only come by once an hour, so you're at 3 hours. But if there was a bus that came by every 30 minutes and you caught one at 5:30, you got to the pharmacy and you were able to catch another bus at 6, and then you went to the grocery store and you're able to catch another bus at 6:30, you would be home by 7. So you literally cut your 3 hours down to an hour and a half in just the amount of time it takes you to do things. And so we think that that's going to be very useful for our riders, but also people who maybe are not choosing to ride Greenlink because of that schedule implication. But in order for us to start increasing frequency, we've got to have those 2 extra buses and those 2 extra drivers to do that. And so, luckily we have the buses, and that's a big capital expense that we don't have to worry about. But what we don't have is the money to cover the operations costs. And when we talk about operations, we mean the salary to pay the driver, the fuel to put in the buses, and then all the other kind of background operations, things like maintenance on that bus now, the insurance on that extra bus that's operating during the day, right? These other costs that associate with us putting that service out there. And so what we've asked for, in addition to continuing our extended hours, is for us to put these extra buses on the road for 4 hours every morning and 4 hours every evening on 2 routes. And we're not doing it system-wide yet, and that's primarily for 2 reasons. One, we don't have the new maintenance facility that can onboard a lot of additional vehicles in service. And then secondly, we're already struggling hiring drivers for the Saturday shifts. And so if we went to doubling our driver team, it would be, let's phase it in. It would be very difficult for us to do this all at once. But that total cost for us to do the 4 hours in the morning, the 4 hours in the evening on 2 routes is about $215,000. So that's our big operations ask in our next budget request. So to keep us doing everything we're doing, but then add that on for us to continue expanding our transit development plan. So the transit development plan is our plan for developing transit in Greenville County. And so as I mentioned earlier, phase 1 is extending hours, weekdays. Phase 2 is Saturday hours. Phase 3 is frequency on some weekday routes. Phase 4 is frequency on Saturday routes. Phase 5 is adding Sunday service because we currently don't have any transportation services on Sundays. And we recognize that people still work. They still run errands, and they still, they want to go to church and different family activities on Sundays. And then looking out past those, we've identified 19 additional routes that could get to places that are currently either underserved because we know that there needs to be, more service in that area, or there's no service at all. And so where we're looking at for that type of new service would be getting to Travelers Rest, getting out to Easley, getting down to Fountain Inn, getting to Greer, right, serving Pelham Road that has a lot of employment opportunities. So we recognize that there's a lot of additional places we could be going, but we need the funding and the capital and the resources to be able to.